Our topic today is social media. We want to talk about social media, and so I've brought along this team of experts. John Dyer, who lives and breathes social media, right, as our communications guru. All right, World Religions is coming around the corner, and then Kelly Matthews, who's developed a reputation for using social media effectively. So that we'll try and figure out what that means. Garland Dunlap, who of course has been around and is still around. So Garland, welcome back to campus. And then George Hillman, who is so famous he doesn't need an introduction. So, so with that in mind, I want to ask you all first, what different social media platforms are you connected to? Okay.
I mean, I think I have an account on everything, and I probably spend the majority of my time on.
I've never signed up for everything.
Well, you should do it. Yeah, I mean, I spend a little bit of time on Instagram, a little bit of time on Facebook, a little bit of time on Twitter, Snapchat, all that stuff. And I think I have kind of different audiences for each one. So on Twitter, it's primarily programmers and a few Christians and atheists and fun people like that. And then on Facebook, it's more family. So it's kind of different groups for different things.
Okay.
I'm primarily on Facebook. I also have Twitter and Instagram. Instagram's mostly, sunset pictures and the kids and that kind of thing, because my kids are on it, or at least my oldest is right now. But Facebook is my primary mode.
So I am most active on Twitter and Facebook, although if you were to look now, you would find my Twitter hasn't been active for a while because I go through cycles. I have an Instagram account, and I also have a blog that I've not touched for a long while because I was using it for one purpose and then that purpose ended, and so I'll be going back to it at some point.
Because when you left the seminary, you had nothing left to talk about.
Exactly. That's exactly it. No.
I'm on Instagram because my daughter is on Instagram. I don't get Instagram. I realize I am now old and I don't get Instagram, but I'm there because my daughter's on there because Facebook's for old people. I'm
the same way.
I know.
I don't really get Instagram.
Facebook. So the same thing you see on Facebook, I'll post on Instagram. But I'm on Facebook. I'm very active on Twitter, LinkedIn as well. We do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, George is the only person whose reply comes before you post. Okay, okay, I'm the same way. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram mainly again, also because of family. And I have blogged, and I'm also regularly, recently on the Voices section of the Christian Post, which is an every week posting that I do for them. So all of us have some extensive experience in what's going on. John, you pointed out something earlier that I wanted to get to start off with, which is different platforms tend to have different characters and different audiences. Can you help us with that a little bit in terms of what we're likely to be seeing in the various environments that we're in, or do they work similarly and overlap?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what's worth thinking about for all of us is that anything that we do, I think, repeatedly over time, we get better at that thing. And so I think when you think about any social media platform, thinking about what is it kind of which direction does it sort of direct us in toward? And so as we begin to do that thing over time, I know if I take pictures of beautiful things, after a while, I begin to see the world as things I could take pictures of, right? And as I go on Twitter and I disagree with things that crazy people say, I find myself just sitting around kind of in a disagreeable mood sometimes, So I think the question for us is, what are the habits and patterns that these each inculcate, and how does that begin to shape us? Or better yet, how do I begin to adapt myself toward getting better at that thing? And do I want to get better at that thing? I think that's a good question for us to all ask.
Kelly, you're a blogger. Talk about your experience. One, the decision to blog. Two, how do you think about your blog, and how do you view the audience that you're blogging towards? How do you think about how you're representing Christ as you're communicating that?
I would say that's the main purpose, is to represent Christ. I typically will focus on family, relationships, parenting, because I have 4 kids and I'm still in the midst of all of that. So I had a friend say, I want to come to your house and sit, at your feet and watch you be this great parent, because she has toddlers and mine are all grown from that phase. So I laughed at her because I have teenagers, so don't come to my house for that. But I write on that, and so I'm usually trying to pull, not trying, I just sort of end up pulling a scripture to kind of focus around and apply that to whatever phase of life, or whatever stories in the news that strikes my fancy that I need to talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Garland, you say you go through phases, okay? How long have you been feeling like this?
No, good question. So some of what John talked about definitely resonates with me. When I find myself obsessed over world news or obsessed over various events, and I'm finding it starting to creep into my soul, I back off and I take a break. And so for me, social media is a way for me to tap into certain conversations. So if you're looking at my Twitter account, what you will find is the vast majority of what's happening on my Twitter is education related, because there's an education reform conversation that's happening. And so I'm tapping into and getting my pulse on that. For me and Facebook, I'm just listening to some of the cares and concerns that are happening in people who I have affiliations with. But it's not necessarily, for me, Facebook is not a tool for me to maintain a relationship. Come talk to me if you want to have a relationship. Facebook is not a relationship. Facebook is a means by which certain kinds of communication happens. And I think that's some of the mistake that people make. So.
You mean you have 5,000 friends on Facebook and you don't have 5,000 friends?
Yeah, exactly. The reality is the folks who are your friends on Facebook may or may not be your friends. Some of the people are people who I knew in high school, and then some are people who I've met here at the seminary, and everything in between. And the reality of trying to interact with all those people on a regular basis, that's literally impossible. There's only 24 hours in the day. And so I try to do a good job of making sure that I don't mistake what's happening in social media from what's happening in my actual reality and in the spheres of influence that I interact with and touch.
Now, George, I'm not quite sure what to ask you about your use of social media.
I just retweet whatever Garland posts.
Now, how do you view your use of social media?
Yeah, so you cannot be an expert on everything. So stop. You can't comment on, I can't comment on everything. And so just like with Garland with education, primarily my 2 things are going to be education, or going to be leadership development types of things. And I try to tag those with education or leadership. And here's the cool part. So yes, it's not a great tool for relationship. And we're going to talk about this later, of go talk to the person. But on the flip side, it's amazing. We have students who've graduated from here who are now overseas, and I'll get a text message or something saying, hey, that article you posted was awesome. I just translated it into XYZ language and am now using this on leadership development or on education. My students in Hong Kong, for faculty who've taught in Hong Kong, I'm friends with them on Facebook, and they're asking me questions from Hong Kong. I have students in Russia. The translate function works fairly well, and they're writing me questions, and I'm interacting with those types of things. And so I really try to see it for that purpose. Is here's a few things. Parenting, education. Here's just a few things that I think I can maybe talk on, and I want to provide resources for people to, for use, for betterment.
George, that makes a segue into, I think, what is a core use of why people perhaps get attracted to social media, and that is it can be a form, or viewed as a form of a kind of soapbox, where I can get up and broadcast the things that I care about, and or respond to the things that I care about. What are the strengths and weaknesses of that way of viewing social media?
There is no tone in social media, none. Garland and I, we talk about this often.
Yes, we do.
We're very different. And let me tell, I've said this privately many times, and I want to say this publicly, God, in his infinite wisdom, placed Garland Dunlap next to me in an office for 3 years to prepare me for all of the junk that I've had to step into this year. I'm serious as can be. I mean, I'd go in Garland's office every day. Okay, Garland, teach me this. Let's have a conversation about what this looks like. Can you unpack this for me? I remember when the Dallas shootings took place. We didn't get squat done that day. We all sat and talked. I go into Garland. Garland, can you explain Ferguson to me? Can you explain Black Lives Matters to me? We've got to have the conversation like this. And I can't do that on social media. I have to hear tone. And I can't do it in 140, now 280 characters. You cannot communicate tone in hashtags. You cannot communicate tone in tweets. Even videos. I know people that are trying to use videos as well. There's a tone that's there. So I'll brag on Daryl for a second. What we do with the Table podcast, and I know this is a reason why you do this, is I want to sit down and hear a conversation for 30 minutes about something, because you can't solve these problems in 140 characters. The problems are too deep, they're too entrenched, and you've got to have a longer conversation to hear the tone. And so you got to talk to folks. And so the final thing I'll say, then I'm off my soapbox. How about that? And I know I've said this before. Have you looked around this room? You're more diverse here than you are just about any place else in your lives. And you need to take advantage of that. You need to take advantage of that, because this is your chance you're going to have to talk to people who come from different denominational traditions, different ethnic backgrounds, everything. And to be able to have those conversations in a safe environment, that's one of the greatest things of why you do seminary, why you physically come to Dallas, Texas to do seminary versus just reading a textbook. You can read a textbook and watch YouTube videos. But to be able to come here and interact, it's the classroom conversations and it's the conversations after chapel. These are real people.
So what I'm hearing you say is grow your bud so you can get a bud. I mean, that there's the opportunity for relationships on campus in such a way, and to build those relationships, et cetera, that you can that you can develop that personal exchange and that growth that comes from experiencing people who come from different contexts, that kind of thing.
I want to piggyback on something Dr. Hillman said, and that is, number one, if you're looking at, so for the nerds in the room, which is most of you all, sorry. Love you. Yeah, right there with you. Yeah. If you look at a lot of the social science data, what they found is virtual environments and social media are good for maintaining a relationship that exists, but it cannot establish a relationship that does not exist. And I think sometimes we're trying to create relationship through a medium that is not designed to create relationship. And unfortunately, because you don't have access to tone, it's really easy to forget that this is someone who is a friend who actually loves you. So my lovely wife is sitting right over there smiling at me. She's awesome. But
well done.
But I'm trying to picture trying to grow or create a relationship with her without the benefit of being able to look at her, being able to touch her, being able to smell her, being able to hear her, not engaging with all five senses. And I'm failing at the ability to figure out how that works. Now, yeah, there's a large history of people writing letters back and forth, and that's all romantic, but that's the exception, that's not the rule. At some point, you gotta get in front of someone, you've gotta share a meal. There's another social science data that shows that if you share meals, it engenders trust. That's science, folks. And so you got to share space with one another. You have to break bread.
Kelly, now, I know that one of the things that you're concerned about is as parents and kids and the use of media. So I'd like to ask you about that question. So we're going to step out of the box of thinking about how we use media for a second and step into the space that says you're a parent raising kids who now function in this world.
Just say no. Yeah, that would be the ideal parent world, but no, it doesn't work
It
that
doesn't
way.
happen, does it? Yeah, no, it doesn't work anyway.
Right.
So, yeah.
True.
So what advice would you give from that angle as you're thinking about raising kids in this kind of an environment?
Well, first, you need to know what's out there and what they're using. Now, I'm not a Snapchatter, and neither are my children, because I won't let them. There's too much danger. So educate yourself on the apps that are out there. My husband is also a grad, is an educator, and he sees the worst of the worst as an administrator. So I get the inside scoop on what's good, what's not, as far as electronics and social media. So be aware. Always know what your children have opportunity to use. Limit what kind of device they have access to. I have recently used the Disney Circle device in my home. Y'all know what that is? Anybody? It is a filter at the modem level, the router level, so that any device that comes into your home and uses your Wi-Fi clicks in and is subject to the limits that you put. So you can divide it up by child, by device. You can say how long they could be on the internet. You can shut it off immediately. You can do almost anything. It's kind of godlike. So I kind of like that, feeling. But it helps because now I don't have to say, it's time to get off. You've had your time. I can just click a button and it's off. So they love me, yeah. But what I think we're teaching, and I really hope, we have a 17-year-old who is on Facebook. Sometimes he doesn't really go for it too much, and Instagram. Now he likes Facebook for stupid videos. He entertains himself whenever we don't shut it off on him, but really he doesn't use it a whole lot. So, and we have a 14-year-old who has chosen not to even go there yet, which is fine with me. So know what they're doing, check them. Feel free to be the parent and always say, I want to see your phone. Be random about it. Don't let them know. And know the tricks of how they're going to get around you, because there's lots of them. So, and as far as your own use, I think your example is probably going to be the best witness. Are you always on? Are you not looking at them and you're always on the computer? Which is something I have to remind myself quite often, because I work from home and I'm always on the computer. So when they come home, I have to always remember to refocus myself, because they're going to do what they see you doing.
By the way, we've got mics up, so if you have questions for our panel, we'll be transitioning here pretty soon. John, here's the question I have for you. A lot of people do use the media, use these various media for soapboxing, if I can say it that way. And I guess my question for you is, what do you see that you wish you didn't see?
Oh, goodness, yeah. Yeah, I do think that one of the things I see that I wish I didn't see is that I think a lot of us use social media without any kind of plan. So Kelly just laid out a lot of things that you could do to think through how your home's going to operate and what your kids should do. There are rooms full of people this big, full of men and women who have PhDs in addictive computing, and they have a plan for your life. They love you and they have a plan for your life, and that's for you to look at that glowing rectangle all day long, right? So if you don't have a plan, you are not going to win. You are not going to be able to beat thousands of PhDs at what you're doing. So if you don't think through, how am I going to use this media? What's it for? You're probably going to fail. And I think kind of like in seminary, one of the processes of seminary is that some of your beliefs kind of get deconstructed a little bit, and then they get reconstructed. And one of the dangers of being in school is starting to think that your primary value is in what you know, right? What you know is important. That's why we're here. That's why God tells us that we should be studying the Word. But your primary value is not in what you know and who you can quote. And similarly, online, your primary value is not in having right opinions about the subjects of the day, okay? I think it's important for us to do that, but I think at the same time, you can never understand today by immersing yourself in today. What you need to do to be able to understand today is to pull back out of it and to study and to read old books, right? If you want to understand this world, you need to be immersed in the view of Scripture. You need to know Augustine and Aquinas and Calvin and Emily Dickinson. You need to read those people from the past to be able to understand the present. So I think social media is a great way to get a pulse on society, but if that becomes your entire world, I think it can really, really limit you. So I see that sometimes. One of the things I regret is people that don't really know what it is that their plan is for why they're using it. They're just doing it because it's there. And that's what I think all of the marketers would love for you to do, is to just not think about it. And then the other one is to say that this is their whole thing. This is the only way of understanding things, and to not to step back and to read old books.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So develop an operational theology of social media. Hey, you're at seminary, you probably should be thinking about how to apply your theology to things other than the Bible. Go figure. And so one of the things that I know for me, I have to thank John Hanna, who introduced me to the concept of unity, equality, and diversity as it applies to the Trinity. And I thought, that's actually a cool idea to apply to the way I think about social media. So how do I maintain Christian unity? How do I bring in diverse voices? But how do I give equality in the sense of equal dignity to things that deserve the equal dignity? And that, for me, is a paradigm out of which I try to operate. Sometimes I'm better at that than others. Now, I'm not saying that's the paradigm you have to operate out of, but if we're going to spend all this time learning theology from Glenn Kreider and from Mike Spiegel and from all these great minds, then take what they're teaching you and apply it not just in terms of what's happening in the classroom, but also in the way you live your life.
Sure.
So this might be really fun. During the election, I kind of got this reputation for people didn't know which way I voted or which way I was going to vote, because I would share articles. And instead of your opinion, I've found that reading something that people have actually spent time researching and thinking through and putting a long form thought together, and I would share that on both sides. So I had people really confused, because what I wanted to do was make them think, not to tell them what I thought so much, because I didn't know at that point which way I was going to go. And after the election, a friend from home sent me this article, and he was really upset. And he said, "Answer this, you people." You know, he assumed I voted for Trump. And he was like, what about this? So I wrote him back. I said, well, I mean, I'll be happy to read the article, but first I want to know why you are sending it to me. I didn't vote for Trump. Oh, no, really? You didn't? I mean, we had this really great conversation. I'm so sorry. I just assumed because you shared this other article that was pro this. And I said, no, I was just trying to show what people are thinking. So I say that to encourage you to read the articles, read the books, and not always spout off your opinion, but make people think. If you're going to get into an issue, which you know is always kind of hairy, but there are people who are going to troll you, and you have to be able to discern, do I even need to respond? Most of the time, no. But sometimes my little mantra I've been thinking is, think before you type, or think as you type. And then step back and ponder before you post. Y'all like alliteration here, I know this. So, and that by ponder, I mean you might need a whole day to think through, am I actually gonna click it and make it go? Because sometimes that emotion is in there and you are just in it and you have something to say, but the next day you realize it's not worth it. So erase it and move on.
So I just want to follow up with that real quickly. So here's your hint for writing your papers as well. Always go to the original source. Yes. Do not depend on, well, so-and-so is quoting so-and-so, or so-and-so said this about so-and-so. And you can insert whoever you want to in the people doing the quoting. You're at this level, you're leaders. You're in a master's program. You are leaders of the future church. You need to know the original sources, and so you need to be able to interact with the sources. And again, it's not going to be 140 characters, long form. But and the other thing I would say is, so I'll throw out Twitter for example. Twitter's going to be my downfall, I know eventually. But if you're going to play on this platform, whatever platform it is, just be prepared. Just be prepared. And so when you throw this long form out there, just know, okay, I'm not going to, what happens sometimes is people throw things out and then all of a sudden you get a little pushback and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. And It's too late. It's way too late. I think John says this: the three things that are permanent, the souls of men, the Word of God, and what you post on social media. So it's those three things are the things that are permanent. But yeah, think through. But again, don't quote other people. Go to the original source. That's really what I want to encourage you with that.
And online, when you're sharing these articles, please vet your sources that way. What you share, you will be associated with. And there's a blogger that you may know, I will not name this person, who 95% of the time speaks truth. It's biblical. I agree with them, but I will never share anything from that blog because the tone is so ugly. Even if I agree, which, like I said, most of the time is true. Because if I do that, somebody's going to say, you're like that person. And if you agree with that person, well, I'm not sure I really like you either. Or I'm not going to listen. And I've had friends who will share from this blog because of the truth in it, and I immediately write it off. I mean, mentally, I just blow right by it, and I just, it's a ding on their character mentally, even if it maybe shouldn't be. But you're going to be associated with whatever it is you share. And if you're in charge of a church, if you're a minister, these things are going to reflect on your church and your ministry as well.
I want to step in here with something that happened to me at one point that I was totally unprepared for. And that is, spent a long time working on a post, posted an article that I thought was good, went to post it, and then the platform that I had posted through had a picture attached to the article, which I didn't know was going to be there, that totally threw off the direction of the post that I was posting. And I ended up spending all my time having to interact with the picture that had been put with the post that I had no responsibility for, rather than what it is I had put in the post. And it gave me pause because I realized some of what happens is beyond control. And the point I want to raise here in talking about that and also talking about tone is kind of this question, then we'll go to the mics. No conversation you have on social media is an in-house conversation. The moment someone looks up your name and sees Dallas Theological Seminary student next to your name, all of a sudden your representation has changed. You're not anonymous, even if you have a clever alternate name, okay? What does that mean? Sincere question.
We represent Christ, and we represent our school, we represent our churches, we represent our spouse. Our identity is not solitary, no matter
Sometimes
how much we wish
our
it.
race.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think, that passage in James 3 where it says, those of you who tweet will be judged more strictly. And that's just... But in all seriousness, now that you're in seminary, you are sort of a leader in that James 3 sense, and what you do now carries a lot of weight. And
Wasn't that a bird that came down on Jesus at the baptism?
Well, and I want to talk about it's a two-edged sword. So I want to talk about you have incredible power. You have power to set the agenda of the conversation. The theological debate is happening in social media. You have the power to enter that conversation, and again, if it's quality stuff, it's good stuff, you actually have the power to change the conversation. And sometimes people will say, oh, well, this person actually sounds like they know what they're talking about. So it goes both ways.
I don't think we can stress this question enough. That the impression people get of what the church is about, and not just what it says, but how it says it, is going to be formed by the impression of people looking over your shoulder and saying, so that's how the church interacts with these kinds of concerns. And that's kind of the tone that they have. And that's the way they care about their neighbor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, fill in the blank. that's why I think you almost have to go overboard in thinking about the tone of what you communicate when there isn't a voice, a face, or a verbal expression, or the ability to hear it, et cetera, behind it, so that there's, there's no doubt about where you're coming from as you're expressing what may be convictions, but do it in a way that communicates. The scripture always talks about engaging with outsiders with gentleness and respect. And it says, let your speech always be seasoned with salt. Now, always is kind of a technical term that you have to think about, okay? Because it kind of means like a lot of the time, okay? All right? I mean, you have to be in third year Greek to get that. So it's really, really important how you deal with this. Mike, go ahead.
So I had a question for you guys. I noticed a lot of the talk so far is like me, I, you, but in terms of leadership and organization, particularly in the church, I've seen pastors who kind of use that to keep a finger on what their congregations are doing, youth groups who use it to keep in touch, people who decide, hey, we're going to do our communication through Facebook and that's going to be our platform. In terms of that, I also haven't seen a whole lot of thought for, well, why are we doing this? So to kind of give this multidimensional question, how do we raise that question in our churches and among leaders and people looking to us? And what are your thoughts in general on the use of that in that way?
So, I mean, I think it's social media is a way to communicate. It's a tool. The cell phone is not evil. It's just a way to keep in contact with people. What I would say is, as you begin to bring in technology, you should be thinking theologically about why and when you're using that, and let that help inform and guide what happens after that. Again, if you're asking me, I think incarnational ministry is a good thing, and incarnation means in the flesh. So I'm going to try to do as much as I can as possible in person, because I think there's value there. But that's me. You have to decide theologically what you think about that, and then let that guide how you think about those platforms.
Yeah, I think in the last several years, there's been kind of a heightened expectation that ministries and maybe ministry leaders would be responding to more of the issues of the day. And I think in many cases that's right, that I think there are a lot of issues of justice to which we should be speaking and not be silent on. And that pressure is really high to know when to do it. And so at DTS, one of the things I've done is work with Dr. Bach and Dr. Bailey to kind of come up with sort of a heuristic of what things we might think about responding to and in what venue. So we would think about what things we might want to say only in chapel and what things might maybe just be on social media. But at the same time, we might think about things that we would put on Twitter versus things we would put on Facebook or somewhere else where there's more interaction and more commentary and more chances for disagreement there. And then what things we might put in a blog post and whether or not we turn the comments on. So we kind of have a heuristic and a plan for those things. If there's another mass shooting, or if there's a terrorist event, or if there's something that's kind of just a major cultural issue, we've kind of built that. So I think that can be a helpful thing to have some kind of model there, and then to take stock of it. So in the American liturgical calendar, we are moving from Super Bowl to Valentine's Day, right? In the church calendar, tomorrow is something very different, right? And so during the Lenten season, you have a chance to maybe be thinking about, maybe I want to do a little reset and a little reboot about what I'm personally going to do. And then really the important thing is not so much what you do or what you don't do, but in prayerfully and in community reflecting on that and to be able to say, man, how is this shaping me by taking a 40-day break from something? And I think with your organization, it has to be kind of a continuous cycle of thinking through, because things have really changed. I mean, the expectation of how we use each of these platforms is very different than it was even 5 years ago. So I think it has to be an ongoing process.
I live daily with the problem of figuring out when I'm speaking for myself and when I'm speaking for a whole mass of people that I represent as someone who's tied to an organization and fairly visible in it. There is not a decision that gets made with regard to the use of social media by me that does not ask the question, how will this impact my colleagues if I speak in this way to this topic? And so there are times when there are clear disclaimers put on what I do because of the medium that I operate in which this is the opinion of Darrell Bach, and don't ask John Dyer what he thinks of it, okay? or vice versa, and that sometimes is done on purpose, because you do at times want to speak in, but you also want to make the signal clear about this issue is so complicated and so complex that I'm speaking into it as a matter of discussion and not a matter of imprimatur, and just to stir people's thinking, to get them thinking. So sometimes that's helpful, but the higher up you are in an organization, the more you have to give thought to the fact that you are not operating on an island. Now, the reality is, and we've talked about this earlier, you actually are never unconnected and unaffiliated when you speak. You are always connected to your commitment to Christ if someone knows you're a Christian. And you are almost always connected to the organization that's sitting by your name on that page if there's identification on it. And so all of that means a need to speak more carefully about how you say what you say, even if what you say may be controversial. And like I say, there is not a day that goes by for me where that is not one of the primary questions I'm facing as I think about what it is I'm getting ready to say to the people who relate. So the whole institutional thing is a huge area, and it's a terrific question because I think most people, when they tweet or post or whatever, think of themselves as these great independents, okay, and they are dragging their identity, their corporate identity, with them wherever they go.
Yeah, my social media accounts could probably be best described as voyeurism. I look at people, I like their posts, I comment, but I don't post a lot, frankly, because I'm in this room. And I know that someday a church is going to hire me, hopefully, and they're going to look at my accounts. So my question for you guys would be, I feel the need to say a lot, right? Because there's often a tonality in social media. If you're being quiet about race, you're being quiet about gender, if you're being quiet about social justice, you're complicit. How do we strike that balance, those of us who want to get jobs, among people who are divided?
But you got to be you. I don't know how to. I want to know what your heart is. I want to know what you're passionate about. The church is going to figure it out one way or the other. And so it's true that because I follow all of you. I know what you're thinking. I know these types of things. But again, because I want to know your heart and passion. But again, from the standpoint of a church, they're absolutely going to be looking at you and looking at your social media feeds and looking at, hey, does this person tweet more from Fox News or from CNN or from MSNBC? Because it matters. It matters. I can throw something out, and if it's Fox News, half this room will say, well, and if I throw out something from MSNBC, half of this room will say, well, the sources sometimes matter with those things. But it's a hard balance. And the thing is that it's a moving game as well. Like 5-10 years from now, people are going to say, Facebook, how many of you have a MySpace account? Is anybody still sticking with Google Plus? I mean, there's things like that. So, if you're under 22, again, you're not even on Facebook. That's why Facebook bought Instagram, because they saw those types of things, and so even like segments of media, segments of population. But it's really hard. We live much more public lives now.
If you can't say it well, gently, you probably shouldn't say it. And that doesn't mean you can't be direct. That doesn't mean you can't lay your view out on the table, but you ought to be able to say it in such a way that you don't demean anybody or anything like that. I think the most dangerous thing on social media is the use of sarcasm. And so I will be sarcastic at points because it's just in my soul, okay? But I will think very hard about it before I do it.
But stop trying to win the argument.
Yeah.
I think, like, practically, stop trying to win the argument, because you're not even going to convince them anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the intersection of grace and truth. If you can be both, you've probably got a good post.
Has anyone here won an argument online?
So everyone in this room needs to follow Christian Williams. Hashtag.
Someone who was deaf, blind, and mute.
But that was okay.
I was going to say one other thing, because I teach this in my Change and Resistance class. There's debate, there's game, and there's fight. Some people just learn by debate. I've got a member of my church that he's just going to debate you. He loves you. He's just going to debate because that is his learning style. And that's one thing, or he wants to learn more. There's other people. I have family members. It doesn't matter what I post. They're going to post the opposite thing because it's a game to watch you get riled up. But when you cross over into a fight, that's when I'm going to eliminate you. There's a difference in debate and then the idea of I'm shutting you down. You have now crossed the line into the fight, and you can't go there.
Yeah, I think sometimes we feel like we lose control over the conversation and we have no power and it's back and forth. You can block them. You can shut it down. Yeah. Have an end game, plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so what up? I post a lot, probably too much. Anyway. No, that's not true. I'm not going to apologize. I post a lot. So I would think the question would be, because it was brought up that sometimes, like, you don't want to post things because X church is going to, like, scroll through your social media account and be like, oh, you stand for this, or oh, you stand for that. And inevitably, you're going to end up in some type of conflict with somebody because you're going to post something and somebody's not going to like it. So I guess the questions would be, what would be the proper rules of engagement for entering into conflict, because not all conflict is bad. So what would be the proper course of action when you're entering into that environment where somebody has, maybe not trolled you or come at you, because I will block you if you troll me. But when someone has come at you with a rebuttal, what would be the proper course of action, or like 20 people?
Direct, a gentle kind of way. That's where to start. That is an attempt to be overly sensitive relationally in a medium that gives you little relational space. And so I think that's the first thing. That doesn't mean you can't be honest. And by the way, for the person who's worried about people trolling because they say anything, if they say nothing, you don't want the impression of the people that are hiring you that you're just this huge blank slate. They want to have a sense of who you are and what your values are. You can display that by how you interact on social media, and if you give thought to it. That's actually one of the reasons why we did this today. We did this today because we wanted you to reflect on the little portrait that you're painting of yourself as you use social media. And if someone took a picture of it or described it by looking at your posts, what would they say about you? That might be a good question and a test as well. Anything else? All right, let me close this in a word of prayer. Thank you all for your attentiveness. We hope this has been a valuable thing to reflect on together. Father, we do thank you for this day, for your goodness and your grace, just the privilege we have of your being involved in our lives, and you're bringing us in contact, not just with each other, but really with vast amounts of people in ways that even a generation ago could not have even been conceived. But with that privilege comes responsibility. And our prayer is to make us responsible by your Spirit, through your wisdom, through the choice of words that we have, through the way that we engage, so that people may see our commitment to you and to the gospel that we represent. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.